Well, I started with Thompson in 1958, and I went there as their general sales manager. We had success almost immediately, and the idea of having a ball valve plaster pump that would handle sand aggregate gave us a tremendous advantage over the only other pump on the market, which was the Easy On, and was a rotor stator type that could not handle harsh aggregates. However, there was resistance to the smaller aggregate, because people questioned the strength of the concrete after it had cured, and secondly, that it required more cement per cubic yard than you would normally use with the larger stone. But then the pea gravel pump was very successful, and like I say, we would get 25 engines a month from Wisconsin, and they would always be sold out before the month was over. I developed what they called a concrete pumping service, and I gotta tell you, that thing was magical, especially with plastering contractors who could see their business vanishing. And I used this to sell the pumps. In other words, here's a new way to go, a new business that would fit into what you're doing now perfectly. And the concrete pumping service, I don't know whether you remember or not, Doug, was really a bonanza for me and for the sale of the concrete pumps. And the use of pea gravel started to grow and grew more and more, especially in the Southern California area. And I think it was in about '61 when we started working on a large line, large aggregate concrete pump. And of course, by then we had established a beautiful set of distributors over the country. They had been very pleased with the plaster pump. They had been very pleased with the small aggregate pump. As you got away from California, however, the pea gravel pumps were, the biggest market for them was the masonry contractor, who used them for filling block with the reinforced rods. But then we had this distributorship set up based on the success of the plaster pump and the small aggregate pump, that it was almost a natural to move in with a big rock pump. They were satisfied, pleased with what our small aggregate pump and plaster pump would do, and they were felt comfortable about taking on the big rock pump. But the key, one of the real keys to our success, was the fact that I always had a competent, at least one competent, what I termed as a field engineer. And whenever the first pump was sold, either locally or by a distributor, there was always one of our field engineers there for the initial use of the pump. And I got to tell you, there were many anxious moments. You would sit there and wait for that damn concrete to come out the end of the hose. And when it got there, everybody would big sigh of relief, and it wasn't easy. I tell you, boy, the problem of overcoming the stigma of grit in Southern California was even stronger as you moved east. And as you got east, they'd almost laugh at you when you would suggest a 7-sack mix with pea gravel. And maybe, what the hell would be a slump? 7 inches or something, but it was a tough sell all the way. But I remember the people that I hired as field engineers, and one of the very best, and I'd say he was as responsible for our success as anyone, would have been a Joe Smith. He's no longer alive now. I think his son works for Putzmeister, but Joe was a troubleshooter. He could make those pumps work, and he did a magnificent job for me at Thompson. Then, of course, I went to Mako. That was quite an experience. In 1969, for some reason, I guess they decided they wanted, I don't know what they wanted, but they didn't want me any longer.
At Thompson?
By that time it was called, it was the royal jewel of the Royal Industries. Earl Bonenkamp came in one time towards the end of my time at Thompson, and he was pulling a Mako pump. And I looked out the window of my office, and he came up to talk to me, and I says, "Earl, what the hell are you doing with that?" And I always remember, and this cemented itself in my mind. He looked me in the eye and he says, "Dave, it's a better pump." And so I'm sitting here after I don't have a job. I've been off of course I was treated beautifully by Royal Industries when I was let go. They took good care of me. And I'm thinking of this Mako pump, and I turned to my wife and I says, "I think I'll call Marvin May." And I called him, and I made an appointment with him, and I didn't tell him what I was. He didn't know I wasn't working for Thompson, and they always treated me like I was a king when I went to Mako, because we had customers, same customers. He sold scaffolding, and I told him, I said, "I'm looking for a job." I didn't say that to Marvin. I said that to George Adler, who was Marvin's right-hand man, and he said, "Oh my God, just a minute." And he called Marvin, and Marvin came down, and 2 weeks later, that is about January of 1970, I went to work for Mako. We had exactly the same situation. They had this Mako pump that they'd bought from Azar, John Azar. It was a small line pump. The only thing different from that and the Thompson's small line pump, that it had direct gravity flow feed. The concrete didn't go through a manifold. It went right down through the hopper, one move, and it was in the hose. But anyway, Marvin says, "Yeah," he says, "come to work for us." So I did in 1970.